Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Jim Copeland. I'm the Chief Enforcement Attorney here at the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. Today, I'm super excited to get to speak to you all regarding credit reports and scores demystified. Welcome. And again, in true lawyer fashion, I do have to give you all a disclaimer. I am not your attorney. So anything that we discuss today is not meant to be legal advice to you. It's also not meant to serve as any substitute for reading the various laws that we're going to talk about today, seeking your own private legal counsel, or otherwise requesting our guidance and or interpretation on the laws that it administers and enforces. This presentation today is just merely an overview. We're going to be kind of hovering over 10,000 foot view, so a lot of information to cover in really a short amount of time. So first and foremost, the basics of credit reports, and real briefly, because we'll get into a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation. But first, to start our discussion, I want to be sure that everyone is on the same page and understands that there is a difference between a credit report and a credit score. So real briefly, credit reports reflect your credit activity, and we'll talk about that in detail as well here shortly. Credit scores, on the other hand, represent a calculation of activity that is on your credit report. So first, what exactly is a credit report? A credit report, by definition, is a detailed record of how you as a consumer have managed your credit over time. What information, you may ask, is found on your credit report? Where there is a lot of personal information on a credit report. Credit reporting agencies, I'm sure everyone here is familiar of, we call them the big three, the federal national reporting or credit reporting agencies, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, get information from creditors and public records. And once they have all this information, they compile it into a credit report for each individual. Now, from the perspective of our presentation today, we are going to be talking mainly about the big three credit reporting agencies. But I do want y'all to know that there are several other reporting agencies. These are not the only three. Depending on what type of information a consumer or a business is seeking, there may be I guess the easiest way to say it is specialized reporting agencies that cater to a particular group. For example, there credit reporting agencies that deal with lenders. There are credit reporting agencies that deal with employers for pre-employment screening. Government agencies like ours to determine employment. Also other agencies, state and federal, that manage and distribute government assistant programs. There are certain reporting agencies that they engage with. Also, believe it or not, landlords for apartment rentals, banks, also a lot of those, mailers that we get in the mail that sometimes we don't necessarily want or wonder how they got our information. They're reporting agencies that cater to companies that market and sell products and services, debt buyers, debt collectors, insurance companies. I mean, and just to name a few, I could go on and on. So there are a lot of credit reporting agencies. Most folks know about the big three, but just wanted you to be aware that there are others out there. As I mentioned, credit reports have a ton of personal information. It is probably one of the most, I guess, sensitive pieces of information that exists on an individual. For example, your name, any name that you may have used in the past, aliases, former maiden names, married names, current and former addresses that you've lived or that you've been associated with, your birthday, social security number, any historical phone numbers that you have been associated with. So, credit reports, very, very heavy with personal information. Credit reports also contain information on credit accounts. So these credit accounts or any current and past credit accounts that you may have or have had. This will include a little label that distinguishes or tells you what type of account that is, auto or credit card or student loan, mortgage. It will also include information on the credit limit or amount of credit that you have access to for each account. For example, if you have a credit card, it will show you who the credit card is with. It will show you what your credit line is, and it will tell you how much of that credit line is currently being utilized. We'll get here in a few minutes on why that information is important. Also, it will tell you your payment history. That's an important one also. It will tell you the date that the account was opened and closed if it was closed, and it will also tell you the name of the particular creditor. Another section found on credit reports is the public records section. Now, public records is going to contain information on you about any liens that you have, for example, on cars or boats. It will, excuse me, tell you about any civil suits and judgments that you have. If you have been sued and have been ordered to pay someone something and they have a judgment against you, that will be on your credit report. A lot of folks are interested in time frames, things like that. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Also, another public record that is found on your credit report are any bankruptcies that you have filed, Chapter 7, Chapter 13, or if you have filed anything in the bankruptcy court, it will indicate that on your credit report. Also, inquiries. Now, inquiries are one of those items that a lot of folks have questions about and wonder, hey, what exactly is an inquiry? What kind of different types are there? So inquiries, two different types. You have a hard inquiry and a soft inquiry. In the business, they pools, hard pull and a soft pull. So a hard pull is a lender actually having a credit application for you and requests your information from that credit reporting agency. If it is a hard pull, it does affect your credit score, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a few minutes. A soft pull is when you or a current creditor check your report. Also, potential creditors check your report for pre-approval offers. These soft pulls, although they are on there to show the consumer who has requested access to your credit, basically for information purposes. Soft pulls do not affect your credit scores. They are simply listed on there so that you know who has seen a copy of your credit report. A lot of times you see this if you have a current current relationship with a bank or a credit card provider. A lot of providers, regularly or on a set time schedule, want to review their consumer accounts to see if a credit line needs to be increased, or if APR that they're charging you needs to be increased or decreased. These types of activities are what lenders do through a soft pull. And again, these do not affect your credit score. Okay. A lot of folks wonder how their credit reports are used. Credit reports are used, as I briefly mentioned earlier, in a lot of different ways. It's often pulled by creditors and other businesses when you apply to set up, your power or your water accounts at your home. If you want to buy a car, if you need to get a credit card. Another interesting one that a lot of folks don't realize is when you get insurance, car insurance, home insurance, boat insurance, life insurance. Those insurance companies are pulling your credit reports. And long story short, your premiums, among other things, are based on what your credit report says. Better credit gets better insurance premiums. If you rent an apartment, employers can pull your credit, to make sure you are a good employment candidate. For example, here at our agency, we regulate consumer credit marketplace. So our agency, the state would pull our credit here to make sure nothing would be any kind of untowardness or just to make sure that that you're not associated improperly with any lenders, or that it's not awful, or that you pay your bills. We also, our licensees in some programs need to provide a credit report. This is basically so that we can look at a licensee's financial application to for example, we license and regulate, and on topic, and we'll get to them in a minute, we license and regulate credit counselors. So as you can imagine, credit counselors for our agency need to submit a credit report to our agency in order to get a license. Now, most agencies like ours, we're not looking to see that you have debt. That doesn't matter. What matters is how you are dealing with that debt. Are you in collections, or we are not going to allow a credit counselor to get a license if they clearly have no idea how to handle their credit. That's kind of a prerequisite and a good example of why getting a job would the employer would pull your credit. Why should you check your credit report? Well, there are a lot of good reasons to check your credit report regularly, routinely, and first and foremost, one of the biggest and most important reason is because, as we've discussed, there are so many things these days that depend on what your credit report says. It is very important to make sure that the information on that report about you is accurate, complete, and up to date. Real quick personal story, my father and I have the same name, and for a big chunk of my life, we had the same address as well. So, I was getting ready, I believe it was when I started law school, looking through student loans and things like that. I pulled my credit report, and lo and behold, I realized that I had a credit card reporting on my credit report that was not my credit card. Long story short, it ended up, it was an account that was in my father's name, but it just goes to show you that credit reporting agencies, a lot of this is done by computers that are programmed by people, and a lot of it is done manually by people. So it is not unusual to have mistakes on your credit report. You could have a very common name, and lo and behold, could be something on there that you had no idea was on there. Also, it is the easiest, fastest, and best way to preemptively locate and find signs of possible identity theft. The earlier you know that you are a victim of identity theft, the easier it is to straighten that out. Again, if you ever do find yourself a victim of identity theft, please, please, please contact our office. We have a great team of folks here that can walk you through everything you need to do as a victim of identity theft. There are steps that you have to take in order for improper or inappropriate information on your report to get that off. If you are a victim of identity theft, then there are steps you need to take to make sure that the bureaus will take that off. There's information that you need to provide to them. So when you check your credit report, what should you be checking for? Well, as we've talked about earlier, there is a lot of information on that credit report. You need to check your personal information to make sure every place that they said you've lived or that you are living is someplace that you've actually lived. Your telephone number is right, your current telephone number is right, any account information. You need to check to make sure that you recognize account numbers, recognize the creditors, even recognize the amounts that they are reporting. Usually there is a little bit of a lag, maybe a month or so, but the balances should be pretty current within a month or two, depending on when the creditor reports and when the credit report is printed. If you find any errors, there are steps that you need to take, and we will get to those here in a moment. Okay, so you might ask, how do I get a copy of my credit report? Well, credit reports, the three bureaus have to, by law, provide you one free credit report each year. So in order to get that, you can request the report from each of the three main credit bureaus. Once you have received your free report, by federal law, you can always request others, but they might charge you for it. And by federal law, they can charge you currently up to $14.50 for a credit report. Now remember, and we'll get to it in a second, but remember, credit report and credit scores are different, okay? So with the big three, you can get one free one each year. So you can get all three at the same time, just stick it on your calendar every year and say, hey, this is the date that I'm going to request all three of my bureau files, and sit down and go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Or a lot of times what we recommend folks, just to kind of get in the habit, is we sometimes recommend, kind of do it either in quarters or, across, do it every 4 months, like get one from each one throughout the year. And as we'll talk about in a minute, the three bureaus may have different information on them, but if you spread it out kind of over the course of the year, then you tend to be able to spot issues faster. So, depending on the circumstances, you can do them all at once. You can do them over time. So, moving into credit scores. And I do see some questions popping up, so I promise everyone I'm going to get to them. I think I might answer them as we get through, but I'm going to make sure we're making good time, so I'm going to have plenty of time for questions. Okay, so credit scores. Credit scores, different than a credit report. A credit score is a 3-digit number that is designed to predict if you, the consumer, will pay your bills. Now, higher credit scores result in better credit terms and more options for lower insurance premiums. You are less or considered less of a credit risk than, say, someone with a lower number. Now, credit score ranges, there are categories. There are 5 categories for credit score ranges that range from poor, fair, good, very good, and excellent. So a credit score of less than 579 is considered a poor credit score. Anything between 580 and 669 is considered a fair credit score. Anything between 670 and 739 is a good credit score. Anything between 740 and 799 is very good. And anything over 800 is considered excellent credit. So there are different types of credit scores. The top credit scores used these days are your FICO score and your Vantage credit score. So for example, your FICO is one of the more common ones that folks hear about. The Vantage score model was developed, I think, back in 2006 by the 3 national reporting companies as an alternative to FICO. Now, FICO scores range between 300 and 850. FICO or Vantage scores range between 501 and 990. Now, FICO is used in 90% of decisions from creditors whether to grant consumers credit. You also have multiple FICO scores. For example, and we're not going to get way out into the weeds, but I just want y'all to be aware of the terminology. So, for example, we have the Beacon score, which is considered a type of FICO score. You've got the FICO version 2, which are Quest scores. And you also have like a FICO Classic. So, just so you kind of know, but they all fall in to the categories there. So you do have more than one FICO score, as I mentioned, depending on what type of credit you're looking for or what type of consumer service or good you're looking for. Your lenders evaluate your risk using different FICO scores. Auto lenders, for example, use FICO auto scores. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that is an example of one of the specific scores that are tailored to a specific industry. Excuse me. Credit card issuers, Capital Ones, your your bank credit cards, anything like that will use FICO bank card scores. Another interesting question that we see a lot, hey, why do I have different scores? Why are my scores varying? Why do they vary from day to day? Why do they vary from credit score provider to credit score provider? We're going to kind of touch on that here briefly. So, for example, you saw your credit score online provided by your credit card company. Then you sign up for a separate credit monitoring service and checked your score there. And then your auto lender, you went in to buy a car and your auto lender showed you a totally different number. Now, as you see, your credit card company may tell you it's 726. Your separate service has you right at 698. And then your auto lender, when you actually apply for the credit, your lender shows you a different one. Now, first and foremost, the biggest tip to remember is that lenders pay for your credit score. So lenders, by subscription, are generally looking at a different score than, say, like a free service provider will provide you. Because in the consumer space, there are, goodness, excuse me, y'all, sorry. There are different, I guess, categories of credit score. Real briefly, for example, there are educational credit scores. So these are going to be the ones, your credit card provides for you, your credit monitoring service. And there are a lot of free services out there that log in and see your credit score. Because of the different, I guess, analysis or different types of situation that the credit score is provided, it's not unusual and not a bad thing if there's a range. Now, as you can see in the example here, they're all relatively close to one another. See, so that would be something that would be completely normal. Now, if you had one that said 300 and you had one that said 700, then you might want to investigate a little bit further, simply because that could be a little indicator of, hey, wait, something's wonky. Usually happens when a reporter, a credit reporting agency, has some information that another credit reporting agency doesn't have. Credit scores are made up of different parts of your credit report, as we mentioned earlier, two totally different things. So about 30% of your credit score is made up of the amounts of money that you owe. 10% is your new credit. 15% of your score is made up of the length of your credit history. 10% of your score is the types of credit you have, credit mix, and 35%, the biggest chunk of your credit score, is made up of your payment history. Now, payment history, the most important part of your credit score. Payment history includes any information on late payments, collections, charge-offs, bankruptcies, judgments, and liens. All of information from those different categories on your credit report go in to comprise 35% of your credit score. Also, all of it is time-based. The older the information, the less it contributes to scores. Amounts owed, this is the the amount of credit or the amount of money that you owe to creditors. How much money have you borrowed that you have to pay back? It is best to have several accounts, and we'll get into it in a little bit. It's best to have several accounts with lower balances than to have fewer accounts maxed out. Now, to figure your credit utilization, you take your balance and you divide it by your credit limit, and this gives you a percentage. Now, that percentage, it is recommended that your credit utilization is less than 10% per account. That's kind of a good target to shoot for. Obviously, the lower the credit utilization, the better. Length of credit history comprises 15% of your credit score. The longer you have open accounts with creditors, the better. If you're struggling to establish a history, a lot of banks, credit card companies will offer what's considered a secured credit card. So basically what this is that you will go to a bank or a lender and you will give, the easiest example is when a bank. So you would go in, you would open an account, and you would deposit some sum of money. And that bank would say, okay, you have deposited $1,000 in your account. If you agree to not spend that $1,000 out of your account, then we will give you a credit card with a $1,000 limit. Now, what this does is this allows you to have a credit card with a lender that is reporting to a credit bureau. So by virtue of going through this process, you are establishing credit history. New credit inquiries. Touched on this a little bit earlier. 10% of your score is made up of inquiries. So a hard inquiry, as we said, that's when a creditor actually pulls your record. Now, this can only be done when you've applied for credit. It does appear on your credit report, and it does influence your credit scores. As we talked about earlier, a soft pull occurs in cases like where you check your own credit, or when a lender or credit card company checks your credit to pre-approve you for an offer. Soft inquiries do not impact your credit scores. Now, the credit mix, obviously creditors like to see that you can responsibly use different types of credit. So using even amount of different types of credit, such as revolving account, that would be your credit cards. Installment accounts, those are going to be your car loans, or your small dollar loans. You know, you borrowed $1,000 and are paying it back to a lender each month. That's an installment loan. Your auto and your mortgage payments, you know, they like to see a spread. When you have a spread and when you have a great credit utilization, it very positively affects your credit score. So just a couple of examples. Now, I want to preface the conversation we're about to have with a lot of the formulas that the credit score providers use. The precise mathematics are very proprietary, and no one knows exactly how a specific thing will affect your credit. I cannot tell you, hey, if you go apply for a loan, your credit score is going to drop 10 points. It's impossible, because the formulas that are used, or you know, the algorithms and things like that are different across the board or in time. But just as an example, say we have I have two columns here. One's we're going to deal with the Vantage scores, and the other one we're going to deal with the FICO score. So, for example, you've missed your payment on your credit card, 30 days delinquent. So at this point, there is a notation on your credit report. You should expect to see, 70 to 100 point drop on your Vantage score. On your FICO score, you should see a 90 to 110 point drop. That is huge. So just remember, delinquents, that payment history is important. Mortgage charge-offs, you're going to see 130 to 170 points on your Vantage score drop. You're also going to see anywhere from 140 to 160 point drop on your FICO scores. Now, filing bankruptcy, although it is a very good and viable option for a lot of consumers, to be obviously consulted with a bankruptcy attorney given your particular circumstances, but it has a humongous effect on your credit score. It also stays on your credit report, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, for a long time. So bankruptcy going to hit you about 350 plus points on your Vantage score and up to 240 point drop on your FICO score. Question that everybody wants to know, especially if they're out shopping for a car or a new house or some new insurance premium. How do I boost my credit score? Well, obviously the department is not a credit counselor. We do license and regulate them. However, I am not going to give you specific advice on how to boost your credit score, but I would like you to know ways and things to consider when you want to improve your credit score. So obviously, first and foremost, the most important way to boost your credit score is pay your bills on time. Be real careful. Use credit sparingly with your application. So your hard pulls, make sure that your credit history, the longer you've had credit and have used that credit correctly, then the higher your score is going to go. Also, watch your credit limits. Obviously, the higher your credit limit is, the better your credit's going to be, remember, as long as you haven't maxed out that credit, okay? Because then sometimes the benefits or the costs outweigh the benefit. Some common credit myths. We're going to get through these and I'm going to check the questions because I know I've got a few. All right. Checking my credit report will hurt my credit score. Is this a fact or a myth? Well, the fact is getting your credit reports will not hurt your credit scores in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it is, as we've discussed, important for you to get your credit reports routinely and check them regularly. Next myth that we hear a lot: I only have one credit score. Not true. You have multiple credit scores, as I hope I've explained, and I know it's kind of at a high level, but depending on the type of credit you're going for, and this blows people's minds, it blew my mind when we were learning about it, but daily, it changes daily depending on who's reported, how they've reported, and what they're reporting. It is normal to see slightly, and I use that word routinely, slightly different numbers throughout the year and from different sources. Carrying a balance on my credit cards will improve my credit score. Well, fact, paying off your credit cards in full every month is the best way to improve a credit score or to maintain a good one. Creditors do like to see that you can use credit and then pay it off. So that's important. I have to pay to get my credit reports. Fact or fiction? Well, it's sort of fact and sort of fiction. So you're entitled to one free Your one free credit report, as we went through, every 12 months from each of the three. You're also entitled to a free report if you're unemployed and plan to look for a job, if you're on welfare, if you're denied employment or credit, and if your report is inaccurate because of fraud, which would include identity theft. Next one, getting loan estimates from multiple lenders will hurt my credit score. Now, this is important because I do want to make a distinction here. Now, shopping around for credit and comparing offers can help you find the best rates. I want to caution everyone to make sure they do that first to find the best rates. Credit applications themselves, if you apply for credit, it will impact your score. So do your research and find the best, say, card or loan or anything for your particular circumstances, and make sure that you are aware of their offer, understand their offer before you actually apply. Once you apply, then yes, it will be a hard pull on your credit. Closing credit accounts will improve my credit score. Now, this is one of the biggest myths out there. So remember, we talked about the length of time you've had credit. Your credit history is important. So if you go closing your oldest credit account, you're going to lose that credit history. So yes, it will affect your credit. Closing credit accounts, generally, also you need to be careful because if you're closing them, then your credit utilization is affected. We've talked about there are only 3 credit reporting companies. So they're the 3 main ones, but there are others depending on the types. Now, I want to real briefly talk on credit counselors because we see a lot of credit counseling, credit repair scams. Anything too good to be true? It is. Red flags of credit repairs. Remember, upfront fees, totally illegal, total red flag of a scam. No legitimate credit repair company is going to require you to pay an upfront fee. Now, another red flag is a company that promises to remove all negative information from your credit report. This is impossible, okay? Negative information, if it's inaccurate, can be removed. But negative information does not come off your credit report if it's accurate. And if anyone ever tells you do not contact or do not communicate with your creditor or credit bureau, only deal with me, that's a red flag too. Run the other way. Wanted to real quickly touch on security freezes, fraud alerts. So be sure to monitor your statements also. We do have information on our website, and I'll send it out to everyone too. We do have brochures that talk about security freezes and fraud alerts. Basically, a security freeze is what it sounds like. It freezes your credit. A fraud alert is just that. It is an alert put on your credit accounts that says, hey, if this person applies for credit, then take some additional steps to verify their identity. That's a fraud alert. A security freeze is put on there. Basically, it freezes your credit. You cannot get any new credit, or any new accounts cannot be opened in your name without a specific PIN number. To get a fraud alert, you only need to contact one of the bureaus. For a freeze, you would need to contact all 3 of the bureaus and say, I want to freeze. Okay, so goodness, I was hoping a little bit more time for questions, but we have 5 minutes. So I want to kind of check the questions here. I'm gonna go through order we get and see. All right, if you shop for a new loan within the 14 days, is that one hit for all types of loans or just home and auto? That's a really good question. So I'm not real sure of the 14-day window that you're talking about, but as you're shopping for a new loan, as we discussed, make sure you're shopping the offers before you actually apply. For every application you make, there will be a pool. Okay. For example, a lot of times you walk into a car dealer and you apply for you apply to purchase a vehicle, and that car dealer is going to shop around for you, and they may pull your account from 3 or 4 different lenders, so that will show up as different checks. It will be, oh, I guess I get the 14 days. So there is a period of time that creditors, like, although the request all the individual credit requests will show up on your credit report. If they're all within a short period of time, it does not affect your score. Now, again, no one knows exactly how much or how different, but creditors, obviously, it's understandable when they see somebody that is shopping for a mortgage from 3 or 4 different lenders within a month or two. Perfectly normal. And that would not affect your credit so much as, say, that you just apply for a different credit card every month. Those are going to, they will affect your scores 2 different ways. Next question is it best not to use a credit card rather than to cancel it or close it out if I don't plan on using it, and how will it affect my credit score? That's a super good question. So again, taking into account that credit history is a big part of your credit score, what I would recommend doing is keeping the accounts. Pay them off, put the credit card off in a locked safe or drawer somewhere where nobody can get it, and leave that on your credit report, because the length of time will help you better than, say, a closed account. Does your site have a list of companies who would provide a credit report for prospective renters? That's a good question too. So no, we don't actually provide that on our website because we don't regulate the actual bureaus, but that is a really good information. So some federal agencies do. Also, you can just, I would never recommend to just Google something, but that's a very valid way to research those things. There are companies that do those things, but your best bet is, if you are wondering, say, like if you were shopping around for an apartment, then find out what that particular apartment complex looks at, because like I said, there are a lot of different providers, and you'd still be taking a shot in the dark unless you knew which one they used. Okay, next question. Oh, that's a good one too. Do credit bureaus provide credit scores? Why is the credit application not a private contractual matter that no one else needs to know? Super good. That's 2 different questions. So super good questions. So credit bureaus, the big 3, do provide credit scores. There are also other entities that provide your credit score. For example, American Express, Capital One's, like a lot of your credit card providers, like, provide the card holder an option to check your credit scores. Now, as to the question about the application, so a credit application is a very secure form, and it should only be completed for a legitimate creditor. Now, that creditor does have access to your information because you have given them permission to. If you want credit, then a creditor has to have you sign a credit application, because a creditor, nobody can pull your credit report without your permission. And that is what that credit application is basically your permission to that creditor. So I hope that answers that question. It is private, and they should not be sharing that information with anyone other than their providers of credit. Are people notified of alerts that are placed? That's a super good question. So the creditor is notified if there is an alert placed when they go pull a file. As a consumer, I believe when you place those things, you might get like an email confirmation that one has been placed. But once if you place it, you will be able to see that one's placed on your credit report. Creditor will see that one has been placed when they go to pull your credit. Ooh, another good question. Who regulates credit bureaus? So credit bureaus are regulated at the federal level, and that's usually done by the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Will putting a freeze on your credit stop companies from getting your scores? Yes. All right, so if someone with great credit adds you to one of their credit accounts that has a good limit and low utilization, is it better to remove yourself from their account if their utilization becomes almost maxed out? How might that affect your credit? All right, so that's a good question. So if you're an authorized user on a card, then yes, it will be reflected on your credit report. Now, and that is for all the good and for all the bad. If you're an authorized user on that account and it's in good standing and it's a high limit and all this other stuff, then yes, that's going to affect your credit positive way. If it's high utilization and anything else, it's going to reflect your score in a negative way. So I can't tell you exactly how that's going to affect your score. Obviously, negative's going to pull it down, positive's going to send it up. The specific number depends on way too many factors to give you a drop dead. It's going to drop your point. It's going to drop your credit score 100 points. So we'll follow up. Okay, so question on, will putting a freeze on your credit stop companies from getting your score? And then the follow-up to that is specifically the company soliciting you for pre-approval. So that's a super good question too. Those pre-screened offers that everyone gets, no, the freeze and the checks do not stop those from coming. But those companies also really aren't getting your credit score itself. They are getting access to certain information on your credit report, which is why they always say, it's a pre-approval offer and nothing is guaranteed. So they know a little bit about you, but they would not know as much about you as if you have actually filled out a credit application with them. So will not stop your pre-screened offers, but let me tell you, to do that, you need to go to optoutprescreen.com. So that's www.optoutprescreen.com. And that should limit those. So I hope that answers your question. Now, I'm way over time. I don't see any questions. I sure appreciate you all joining us. Thanks, everyone.